What if you never had to pay property tax ever again? Seriously, no more watching your home's value go up and thinking, great, now my tax bill is going to climb too. It sounds like a total fantasy, right? Well, right now, about a dozen states are actually trying to make this a reality. This isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's officially gone mainstream. You know that feeling, right? When that dreaded envelope shows up in the mail and your stomach just instantly ties itself in a knot. We've all been there. It's a real emotional gut punch. And you better believe politicians have figured out that promising to get rid of that pain is an incredibly powerful message. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? The promise sounds amazing, like absolute freedom. But what if that dream comes with a hidden price tag? What if someone else is expected to pick up the tab, and nobody's talking about who that is?
So how in the world did this pretty radical idea suddenly become a winning campaign promise? Well, it definitely didn't just happen in a vacuum.
The timing here is everything. Think about it. We just lived through a massive, historic housing boom. Home values shot through the roof, and of course, property tax bills went right up with them. People are understandably angry, politicians are paying very close attention, and all of a sudden, zero property tax starts to sound less like a fantasy and more like a real solution.
And this is popping up all over the country. You've got Texas, where they're sitting on this enormous multi-billion-dollar surplus and promising to use it to just wipe out the tax. In North Dakota, they couldn't get it done in one go, so now they're just chipping away at the system, taking it apart piece by piece. Over in Kansas, you're seeing this big fight between farmers on a really valuable land and the cities that desperately need that tax revenue. And then there's Idaho, where it's a full-blown crisis. Longtime residents are literally being taxed right out of the homes they've owned for decades.
But here's the thing. This is usually where the sales pitch stops, right? After all the cheering dies down, this little thing called financial reality starts to set in. Because those costs, they don't just disappear into thin air. They just get moved. And this is the question, isn't it? Property taxes are the financial backbone for pretty much everything that makes your town run. The schools, the roads, the fire trucks that show up when you call 911, the public library, all of it. So if that money suddenly vanishes, it has to come from somewhere else. So who pays? Well, here's the answer. This move reveals a fundamental change in how we fund things. We're talking about going from a tax based on wealth, that is, what you own, to a tax based on consumption, what you buy. So let's be super clear. This isn't really a tax cut. It's a tax shift. And this kind of shift has a name. A sales tax is what's known as a regressive tax. And here's why that matters. A billionaire rancher and a minimum wage worker, they both pay the exact same 7% sales tax on a gallon of milk. But for that worker, that tax represents a much, much bigger chunk of their paycheck. The burden gets shifted and it falls heaviest on the people who can least afford it. So what does this look like when it plays out in the real world? Well, we can actually look at Louisiana. For a long time, many residents there have effectively had zero property tax. The results? You've got roads that are falling apart, bridges with some pretty scary weight limits, and an infrastructure backlog that they measure in decades, not just years. And then there's the human cost. This stuff gets personal fast. In Arizona, aggressive tax caps push some school districts to the brink. They literally had to hold special elections just to beg voters for money to keep the lights on and fund basic operations. The trade-off became painfully clear. You might have saved, say, $600 a year on your taxes, but your kid's school just lost its math teacher. So yeah, when a tax shift like this happens, it is not neutral. It creates a very clear set of winners and a very clear set of losers. Let's just lay it all out. Who wins? Well, it's the people who own the most property. We're talking large landowners, big corporations, and landlords. They get a huge tax break. And the losers? Well, that's renters, who see absolutely no benefit while their sales taxes go up. It's low-income workers, who now have to shoulder more of that regressive tax burden. And of course, it's the public services, the schools, the fire departments, that rely on that stable fund. And we've got to talk about renters for a second, because this is a massive piece of the puzzle. About a third of all Americans rent their homes. So when a landlord gets a big property tax cut, do you think the rent goes down? Almost never. That savings just goes straight into the owner's pocket. The renter gets nothing out of the deal except a higher cost of living, because now they're paying more in sales tax for everything they buy.
And believe it or not, it can get even stranger than that. Some states have ended up creating these bizarre two-tier systems. In places like Oklahoma, for example, if you bought your house 20 years ago, your annual tax bill might be like $400. But if your new neighbor buys the exact same house right next door today, their bill could be $4,000.
It's not tax relief for everyone, it's just tax timing, and it creates this huge inequality right there in the same neighborhood. Okay, so the next time you hear a politician get up on stage and promise to eliminate your property taxes for good, what should you be asking? Because it's definitely not as simple as the campaign slogans make it sound. Here are 3 critical questions you have to ask. First, what's the replacement? How are you going to pay for everything? And if the answer is a budget surplus, your follow-up has to be, what happens when that one-time money runs out? Because it always does. Second, who benefits the most from this? Don't just listen to the ads. Look at the actual numbers. Does a school teacher really gain as much as a real estate developer? And third, what services are at risk? Because trust me, nothing is never the real answer. And that really brings us back to the final most important point. The question isn't whether you're going to pay. The real question is how you're going to pay, who's going to be paying with you, and whether the change will be so subtle you don't even notice it's happening. So you've got to ask yourself, is this really a tax cut, or is it just a tax shift?